The dust rose in lazy spirals around her fingertips as Flora Catherine traced another line across the hard-packed earth, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration as she sketched the outline of a wild Mustang in mid-gallop. She sat cross-legged in the shade of the mercantile building, her faded calico dress pooling around her like spilled water, unaware that someone had stopped to watch her work. Isaac Keller pulled his mare to a halt, his hand resting easy on the saddle horn as he studied the woman on the ground with curiosity burning bright in his chest. He had ridden into Downieville, California this morning with nothing more on his mind than picking up supplies and heading back to his ranch before sundown. But something about the focused intensity on her face made him forget about bacon and coffee and flour entirely. The picture she was creating was remarkable, all fluid lines and movement despite being nothing more than scratches in the dirt that would be gone the moment a strong wind picked up or someone walked through. Isaac dismounted slowly, not wanting to startle her, his boots making soft sounds against the wooden boards of the sidewalk. It was August 1876, and the summer heat pressed down on Downieville like a heavy blanket, making the air shimmer and dance above the street. He was 24 years old, tall and lean from years of hard work on his cattle ranch, with sun-streaked brown hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of good whiskey. Flora looked up suddenly, perhaps sensing his presence, and Isaac found himself staring into eyes so green they reminded him of the pine forests that blanketed the surrounding Sierra Nevada mountains. She was young, maybe 21 or 22, with auburn hair that escaped in wild tendrils from the simple braid hanging down her back. Freckles dusted her nose and cheeks, and there was a smudge of dirt on her chin that made something warm and protective stir in his chest. "I am sorry," she said quickly, scrambling to her feet and brushing at her skirt with hands still gray with dust. "I know I should not be sitting here blocking the way. I was just waiting for my father to finish his business inside the assay office, and I got carried away." "Do not apologize," Isaac said, and was surprised by how rough his voice sounded. He cleared his throat and tried again. "That picture you were making, that was something special. You have real talent." A flush crept up her neck and into her cheeks, turning her skin the color of rose petals. "It is nothing really, just something to pass the time. It will be gone in an hour anyway." "That is a shame," Isaac said honestly, "and a picture like that deserves to last longer than an hour." Before Flora could respond, a grizzled man in his 50s emerged from the assay office, his face lined with disappointment and frustration. He had the same auburn hair as Flora, though his was heavily streaked with gray, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of too many failed dreams. "Flora, get your things. We're heading back." He barely glanced at Isaac before starting down the street toward where their wagon was hitched. Flora cast one apologetic look at Isaac before hurrying after her father, her skirts kicking up small clouds of dust as she went. Isaac watched her go, something tugging at his ribs that felt suspiciously like regret. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the drawing in the dirt, committing every line to memory before the wind could steal it away. Then he turned and walked into the mercantile with a new purpose entirely. The interior of the store was dim and cool after the bright heat of the street, and Isaac's eyes took a moment to adjust. The proprietor, a thin man named Gerald Whitmore, looked up from his ledger with a welcoming smile. "Isaac Keller, good to see you. What can I help you with today?" "I need the usual supplies," Isaac said, then hesitated. "And I am looking for something else. Do you have any paper, good quality paper, and maybe some pencils?" Gerald's eyebrows rose with interest. "Planning to take up correspondence? I have some writing paper in the back, and I think I have a few pencils left from the last shipment. Let me check." While Gerald rummaged through his stock, Isaac tried to tell himself he was being foolish. He did not even know the woman's last name, and chances were good he would never see her again. Downieville was a small town, yes, but it served all the miners and ranchers and farmers scattered throughout these mountains, and plenty of folks came through once or twice and never returned. But then he remembered the way her face had lit up while she was drawing, the complete absorption in her work, the obvious talent that deserved better than dirt and a stick. He remembered those green eyes and that apologetic smile, and he found himself pulling out his money before Gerald even returned with the supplies. "Found them," Gerald announced, emerging with a bundle wrapped in brown paper and a wooden box. "This is good quality drawing paper, came all the way from San Francisco, and I have got 6 pencils here, different grades for different kinds of drawing. My late wife used to sketch a bit, so I know these are decent." "I will take them," Isaac said without asking the price. Gerald's expression turned knowing, but he had the good sense not to comment. He wrapped everything carefully and added it to Isaac's order of flour, salt, coffee, and dried beans. As Isaac loaded his saddlebags, his mind was already working on the problem of how to find Flora again without looking like some kind of desperate fool. The solution came to him 3 days later when he was in the Silver Nugget Saloon, nursing a beer and half listening to the conversations flowing around him. 2 miners at the next table were complaining about the price of supplies, and one of them mentioned a name that made Isaac's ears perk up. "Charles Crawford is about done," the miner was saying. "Poor fool has been chasing gold in these mountains for 5 years now with nothing to show for it but debt and broken dreams. Heard he has got a daughter taking in laundry and mending just to keep food on their table." "Catherine Crawford?" the other miner asked. "Pretty girl, always has her head in the clouds." "That is the one. Shame, really. She could have married any number of men by now, but she keeps refusing them all. Maybe she's holding out for someone with actual prospects." Isaac felt his heart kick against his ribs. Flora Catherine Crawford. He had a name now, and a way to find her that did not involve him looking like he had been searching. He finished his beer, dropped some coins on the table, and headed out into the evening air with purpose in his stride. It took him another 2 days to work up the nerve to actually ride out to the Crawford place. He spent those days working on his ranch, mending fences and moving cattle, but his mind kept drifting back to green eyes and pictures in the dirt. He told himself a dozen times that he was being ridiculous, that she probably would not even remember him. But the wrapped package of paper and pencils sat on his table like an accusation, demanding action. The Crawford property was a small, tired-looking homestead about 5 miles outside of Downieville, set in a narrow valley where a creek ran silver through the pine trees. The house was more of a cabin, really, with gaps in the chinking and a roof that clearly needed repair. A vegetable garden struggled in a patch of cleared ground, and laundry hung limply on a line stretched between 2 trees. Isaac dismounted slowly, suddenly aware that he had no idea what he was going to say. He had the package tucked under his arm, and his palms were sweating despite the cool mountain air. Before he could overthink it further, the cabin door opened and Flora stepped out, a basket of wet laundry balanced on her hip. She froze when she saw him, her eyes going wide with surprise. She was wearing a different dress today, just as faded as the first, but in a soft blue that made her eyes look even greener. Her hair was tied back with a piece of string, and she looked tired in a way that made Isaac's chest ache. "You," she said softly, and then seemed to realize how that sounded. "I mean, good afternoon. Can I help you with something?" Isaac stepped forward, feeling awkward and too tall and completely out of his depth. "I was in town the other day when you were drawing in the dirt outside the mercantile. I am Isaac Keller. I have got a cattle ranch about 8 miles west of here." "I remember," Flora said, and something in her voice made him think she had thought about him too, at least a little. "You said my drawing was special." "It was," Isaac said firmly, "which is why I brought you these." He held out the package, watching as confusion and then dawning realization crossed her face. "You should not have to draw in the dirt, not when you have got talent like that. These are for you, if you want them." Flora set down her laundry basket carefully, as if she did not trust her hands. She took the package with a kind of reverence that made Isaac's throat tight, unwrapping the brown paper with slow, careful movements. When she saw the thick stack of quality drawing paper in the box of pencils, her eyes filled with tears that she blinked away furiously. "I cannot accept this," she said, but her hands were already running over the smooth paper like it was something precious. "This is too much, too expensive. You do not even know me." "Then let me get to know you." Isaac said, the words coming out before he could stop them. I will come by every week, bring you more supplies if you need them, and you can tell me about your drawings. That seems like a fair trade to me. Flora looked up at him, and Isaac could see a dozen emotions warring on her face. Fear, hope, longing, caution. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Why would you do this for me? What do you want in return? Isaac met her eyes steadily. Just your company, if you're willing to give it. I have not been able to stop thinking about you since I saw you creating something beautiful out of nothing but dust and determination. I want to know more about the woman who can do that. The silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of the creek and the whisper of wind through the pines. Then Flora smiled, tentative and shy but real, and Isaac felt like he had just won something far more valuable than gold. I would like that, she said softly. I would like that very much. Over the next few weeks, Isaac became a regular visitor to the Crawford homestead. He always brought something useful when he came, supplies that the family clearly needed even if Flora protested every time. A sack of flour, some coffee, a haunch of venison from his last hunt. Charles Crawford eyed him with suspicion at first, but gradually warmed as he realized Isaac's intentions were honorable, and his gifts were helping to keep his family fed. Flora bloomed like a desert flower after rain. She filled page after page with drawings, her confidence growing with each one. She drew the mountains and the creek, the struggling garden, and the clothesline. She drew her father's weathered hands and the deer that came to drink at dawn. And sometimes when Isaac was there, she drew him, though she always grew shy and hid those pictures away before he could see them properly. They talked about everything during those visits. Flora told him about growing up in Ohio, how her mother had died when she was 15, how her father had dragged her west with promises of wealth and opportunity that never materialized. She spoke of her love for art, how she had learned to draw from her mother, who had once dreamed of being a painter in New York City. Isaac told her about his ranch, about building something from nothing with his own two hands. He spoke of the cattle drives and the harsh winters, the satisfaction of watching his herd grow, the loneliness of eating dinner alone every night in a house meant for a family. He did not say that he was thinking about her more and more, that he was starting to imagine what it would be like to come home to her smile, but he thought maybe she could hear it in his voice anyway. One afternoon in early September, Isaac arrived to find Flora sitting by the creek with her drawing paper spread on a flat rock, working on something with fierce concentration. She was so absorbed that she did not hear him approach, and he took the opportunity to study the drawing over her shoulder. It was a portrait of a woman, rendered with such skill that Isaac felt his breath catch. The woman in the picture was beautiful and sad, with Flora's eyes and a gentle smile. Her hair was caught up in an elaborate style that spoke of a different time, a different life. "Your mother?" Isaac asked softly, and Flora jumped, nearly dropping her pencil into the creek. "You startled me," she said, but she was smiling. Then her expression softened as she looked back at the drawing. "Yes, this is my mother, or at least, this is how I remember her. It has been 6 years now, and sometimes I worry that I am forgetting her face. I wanted to capture her on paper while I still could." Isaac sat down beside her on the bank, careful to keep a respectable distance, even though what he really wanted was to put his arm around her shoulders and pull her close. "Tell me about her." Flora's voice was wistful as she spoke. "Her name was Margaret. She was the youngest daughter of a judge in Columbus, and everyone expected her to marry well and have a conventional life. Instead, she fell in love with my father, who was just a clerk in her father's office. Her family disowned her when she married him." "That must have been hard," Isaac said. "I think she regretted it sometimes, especially after we moved west and things got difficult. But she never said so out loud. She just kept drawing and painting whenever she could, and she taught me everything she knew. She used to say that art was the one thing nobody could take away from us, that we could be poor in pocket but rich in beauty. She sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Flora said, and her voice cracked just a little. She got sick the first winter we were here. Some kind of fever that swept through the mining camps. My father tried everything, spent all our savings on doctors and medicine, but nothing helped. She died right before Christmas, and I think part of my father died with her. He has been chasing gold ever since. Like if he can just strike it rich, he can somehow make up for all the ways he let her down. Isaac reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and took her hand. Her fingers were stained with pencil lead and calloused from hard work, and they fit perfectly in his palm. You have not let her down. Look at what you're creating. She would be so proud of you. Flora turned to look at him, and the emotion in her eyes was so raw that Isaac felt it, or like a physical blow. Do you really think so? I know so, Isaac said with absolute certainty. Flora, I have been all over these mountains, and I have never met anyone like you. You take pieces of the world and turn them into something that makes people stop and really see. That is a gift, and you honor your mother every time you use it. Flora was still holding his hand, and now she squeezed it gently. Thank you for the paper and pencils. Thank you for giving me the chance to do this properly. You have no idea what it means to me. I think I'm starting to understand, Isaac said. And even though they were talking about drawings, he felt like they were really talking about something much bigger, much more important. They sat there by the creek for a long time, hands linked, while Flora finished her portrait of her mother, and Isaac wondered how he had gotten so lucky as to find this woman in the vast wilderness of the Sierra Nevada. As September faded into October, the air grew crisp and the aspens turned gold in the high country. Isaac's visits to the Crawford place became more frequent, and he started timing them for the evening so he could stay for dinner. Charles Crawford seemed to have accepted Isaac's presence in his daughter's life, though he was a man of few words and spent most meals staring into his plate with the haunted look of someone who had gambled everything and lost. Flora and Isaac fell into an easy companionship that was slowly, inevitably becoming something more. They went on long walks together, Flora with her drawing supplies and Isaac with his hand resting lightly on the small of her back as he guided her over rough terrain. She sketched while he watched, and sometimes he would point out things he thought she might like to draw. A hawk riding the thermals, a particularly interesting rock formation, the play of light through the trees at sunset. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch of the cabin watching the stars come out, Flora finally showed Isaac the drawings she had been hiding from him. Her hands trembled slightly as she passed over the papers, and Isaac understood why the moment he saw them. She had drawn him at least a dozen times. Isaac working on his horse's tack, Isaac laughing at something she had said, Isaac in profile staring out at the mountains with an expression of quiet contentment. In each drawing she had captured something essential about him, something he had not even known about himself until he saw it reflected back through her eyes. But it was the last drawing that made his heart stop entirely. In it he and Flora stood together, his arm around her waist and her head resting on his shoulder. They were both smiling, and there was something in their faces that spoke of deep contentment, of home found in another person. It was not a drawing of something that had happened, but of something she hoped would happen, and the vulnerability of that hope made Isaac's chest feel too small for his heart. "Flora," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "Can I kiss you?" She looked up at him with those impossibly green eyes, and he could see his own feelings reflected back at him. "I thought you would never ask." Isaac cupped her face gently in his hands, careful not to crush the drawing she was still holding. He kissed her slowly, tenderly, pouring all the words he had not yet said into that single moment of connection. She tasted like hope and possibility, and when she kissed him back with equal fervor, Isaac knew with absolute certainty that he had found the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Flora was smiling like she had just discovered something wonderful. "I have been wanting you to do that for weeks. I have been wanting to do that since the first moment I saw you sitting in the dirt with dust on your face and magic in your fingers when my friend," Isaac admitted. Flora Catherine Crawford, I am falling in love with you, and I think I started falling that very first day. Flora set the drawings aside carefully and wrapped her arms around his neck. Isaac Keller, I have already fallen. I think I fell the moment you saw something in me worth treasuring, when you gave me the tools to make my dreams real. Nobody has ever done something like that for me before. They kissed again longer this time, and Isaac thought about the future he could see stretching out before them. Marriage and children, a home filled with laughter and Flora's beautiful art on every wall. His ranch becoming their ranch, his dreams becoming their dreams. It felt right in a way that nothing else ever had. But he knew he needed to do this properly. Flora deserved courting and romance and a proposal that she would remember for the rest of her life. So Isaac pulled back gently, despite every instinct screaming at him to keep holding her close, and stood up with his hat in his hands. I should go, he said reluctantly. It is getting late, and I do not want your father thinking I am compromising your reputation by staying too long in the dark. Flora laughed, a sound like water over stones. My reputation is probably already compromised just by letting you visit so often, but you are right, you should go. Will you come back tomorrow? I will come back every day if you will have me, Isaac promised. He rode home that night with his heart singing in his chest and plans already forming in his mind. He had some money saved up, enough to give Flora the kind of wedding she deserved and to help her father get back on his feet. It was time to stop courting and start building a life together. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Isaac arrived at the Crawford place the next afternoon to find Charles Crawford loading their wagon with everything the family owned. Flora stood beside the cabin looking devastated, her eyes red from crying, and Isaac felt dread settle in his stomach like a stone. What is happening, Eamnos? He demanded, dismounting quickly and striding over to Flora. What is going on? Charles answered before Flora could, his voice flat and defeated. We are leaving, heading down to Sacramento, where I've got a brother who can give me work in his store. There is no gold here, never was. I have been chasing a fool's dream, and it is time to face reality. You cannot just leave, Isaac said, looking at Flora desperately. Flora, tell him you do not want to go. I am 22 years old and unmarried, Flora said, and her voice was thick with unshed tears. I have no choice but to go where my father goes. We have no money, Isaac. We are about to lose this property to the bank, and we have nothing left to sell. My father's brother has offered us a place to stay and a way to earn a living. We have to go. Isaac's mind raced frantically, trying to find a solution. Then marry me, he said urgently. Marry me right now, today, and you can stay here. My ranch is paid for free and clear, and I make enough to support a family. You would never have to worry about money again. Flora's face crumpled, and tears spilled down her cheeks. I cannot do that to you. It would look like I was only marrying you for your money, like I was using you as an escape. I care about you too much to let you think that even for a moment. I would never think that, Isaac said fiercely. Flora, I love you. I want to marry you because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. The timing does not matter. The circumstances do not matter. All that matters is that we love each other. Charles stopped loading the wagon and turned to study Isaac with his tired, haunted eyes. You really love my daughter? More than anything, Isaac said without hesitation. And you can provide for her, give her a good life? I swear it on everything I hold sacred, Isaac said. She will want for nothing, and I will spend every day of my life making sure she is happy and safe. Charles looked at Flora, who was staring at Isaac like he had just offered her the moon and stars. Flora, is this what you want? Yes, Flora whispered. Yes, more than anything. Charles nodded slowly, and some of the weight seemed to lift from his shoulders. Then I guess I'm not going to Sacramento after all. A father should be there to see his daughter married, and I reckon I can find work around Downieville if I am not too proud to take whatever is offered. The wedding took place 3 days later in the small church in Downieville. Flora wore a simple white dress that Isaac had commissioned from the seamstress in town, and she carried a bouquet of the last wildflowers of the season that Isaac had ridden up into the high country to pick himself. Her hair was woven with ribbons, and she was so beautiful that Isaac felt his breath catch when he saw her walking down the aisle on her father's arm. The ceremony was short and simple, attended by a handful of townspeople and the ranch hands from Isaac's property. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Isaac kissed Flora with all the tenderness and passion in his heart, and he heard her sigh softly against his lips. They held a small reception at the Silver Nugget Saloon, which the owner had agreed to close for a few hours in honor of the occasion. There was music and dancing, and Isaac held his new wife close and marveled at the fact that she was really, truly his now. Flora was radiant with happiness, and every time she smiled at him, Isaac fell a little more in love. As the sun began to set, Isaac and Flora said their goodbyes and rode out to the ranch together, Flora riding behind Isaac with her arms wrapped around his waist and her cheek pressed against his back. The ranch house looked warm and welcoming in the golden evening light, and Isaac helped Flora down from the horse with careful hands. "Welcome home, Mrs. Keller," he said softly, and Flora laughed with pure joy. "That is going to take some getting used to," she admitted, "but I like the sound of it." Isaac carried her over the threshold, a tradition that made Flora giggle and protest that she was perfectly capable of walking. But once they were inside, the playfulness faded into something deeper and more profound. Isaac set Flora down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "I love you," he said seriously. "I know everything happened fast, but I want you to know that this is real for me. You're not just some dream I'm going to wake up from. You are my wife, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice in marrying me." Flora reached up and covered his hands with hers. "I know it is real, Isaac. I feel it every time you look at me, every time you touch me. I love you too, so much that sometimes it scares me. I never thought I would find this, a love like this. I thought I would end up married to some miner who wanted a cook and a housekeeper, not a partner. But you see me, really see me, and that means everything." They made love that night with a tenderness that brought tears to Flora's eyes, and afterward they lay tangled together in Isaac's big bed and talked until the stars wheeled overhead. Flora told Isaac about all the things she wanted to draw, all the dreams she had never dared voice out loud. Isaac told her about his plans to expand the ranch, maybe start breeding horses in addition to cattle. They talked about children and what they would name them, about growing old together on this land they both loved. As Flora drifted off to sleep in his arms, Isaac stared up at the ceiling and felt gratitude wash over him so powerfully that it was almost overwhelming. He had come into Downieville that day in August looking for nothing more than supplies, and he had found the missing piece of his soul instead. The first year of marriage was an adjustment for both of them. Flora had to learn how to run a ranch household, how to cook for the hands during busy seasons, how to keep the books and manage the supplies. Isaac had to learn how to share his space and his life with another person, how to be patient when Flora got frustrated with tasks that did not come naturally to her. But through it all, their love for each other only grew stronger. Flora turned one of the spare rooms into a studio, and she spent hours there every day drawing and painting. Her work improved dramatically with practice and proper supplies, and soon people in town were asking to buy her pieces. She painted landscapes of the Sierra Nevada that captured the wild beauty of the mountains, portraits of miners and ranchers that revealed the humanity behind the weathered faces. Isaac encouraged her at every turn, proud beyond measure of his talented wife. He built her an easel and bought her oil paints from San Francisco, commissioned frames for her favorite pieces so they could hang them throughout the house. He never complained about the paint stains on her dresses or the way she would get lost in her work for hours at a time. Her art was part of who she was, and he loved every part of her. Charles Crawford, true to his word, found work in Downieville as a general laborer. It was hard, unglamorous work, but it was honest, and it paid enough for him to rent a small room above the mercantile. He visited Flora and Isaac often, and gradually the haunted look faded from his eyes as he rebuilt his life one day at a time. He never struck gold, but he found something perhaps more valuable: peace with his choices and pride in his daughter's happiness. In the spring of 1878, Flora discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and the joy on his face was something she knew she would remember for the rest of her life. He pulled her into his arms and held her like she was made of spun glass, already protective of the life growing inside her. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying wonderingly. "Flora, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Flora asked, even though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Isaac said. "I feel like my heart might explode from how much I love you, how much I already love this child we made together." The pregnancy was not easy. Flora suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester, and the summer heat made her uncomfortable and irritable. But Isaac was patient and attentive, bringing her cool water and fanning her when she was too hot, holding her hair back when she was sick, rubbing her swollen feet at the end of long days. Flora continued to paint throughout her pregnancy, capturing this moment in their lives on canvas. She painted her growing belly, Isaac's hands resting protectively over it. She painted the nursery they prepared together, the cradle Isaac built with his own hands. She painted her dreams for their child, all the love and hope and possibility contained in one tiny life. Their son was born in November, a healthy baby boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's strong features. They named him Thomas Charles Keller, after Isaac's late father and Flora's father, who had given them his blessing. Charles Crawford cried when they told him, and for the first time in years they were tears of joy rather than regret. Isaac was a devoted father from the very first moment. He would sit for hours with Thomas in his arms, just watching him sleep, marveling at the tiny fingers and the way the baby would grip his thumb with surprising strength. He changed diapers without complaint and walked the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, singing off key lullabies that somehow always seemed to work. Flora captured all of it in her art. Isaac holding Thomas for the first time, the wonder on his face. Thomas nursing at her breast, his tiny hand resting against her skin. The three of them together, a family forged from love and choice and the courage to reach for something beautiful. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch thrived. Isaac's careful management and hard work paid off, and they were able to buy more land and expand the herd. Flora's art began to attract attention beyond Downieville, and a gallery owner from Sacramento made the trip up into the mountains specifically to see her work. He bought 6 paintings on the spot and commissioned more, offering Flora prices that made her gasp with shock. "You are becoming famous, Mrs. Keller," Isaac teased one evening, after the gallery owner had left. "Soon you will be too important to bother with a simple rancher like me." Flora swatted his arm playfully. "Do not be ridiculous. I would give up every painting I have ever made if it meant keeping you and Thomas. You two are my greatest masterpieces." They made love that night with the passion and tenderness of a couple who had weathered storms together and come out stronger on the other side. Afterward, as they lay wrapped in each other's arms, Isaac traced patterns on Flora's bare shoulder and thought about how lucky he was. "Do you ever think about that day I first saw you?" he asked softly, drawing in the dirt outside the mercantile. "I think about it all the time," Flora admitted. "I think about how close I came to never meeting you. If my father had finished his business 5 minutes earlier, if you had ridden into town on a different day, if I had been sitting somewhere else. So many little chances that had to line up perfectly for us to find each other." "I do not believe in fate, usually," Isaac said. "But I think we were meant to find each other, Flora. I think the universe knew we belonged together and made sure our paths crossed when they needed to." Flora turned in his arms so she could see his face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "I believe that too. And I believe that everything that happened, all the hard times and the struggles, they were worth it because they led us here, to this moment, to this life, to each other. Isaac kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and devotion into that single connection. I would live through 100 hard times if I knew you were waiting for me at the end of them. In the spring of 1880, Flora discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She continued to paint throughout, and Isaac marveled at how she seemed to glow with an inner light that made her even more beautiful than usual. Their daughter was born in September, a healthy baby girl with auburn hair and Isaac's whiskey-colored eyes. They named her Margaret Ann Keller, after Flora's mother and Isaac's mother. Flora cried when she held her daughter for the first time, thinking about how her own mother would have loved to meet her granddaughter. Thomas, now nearly 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would sit beside her cradle for hours, watching her sleep and occasionally reaching in to pat her head gently. "Baby," he would say proudly to anyone who would listen. "My baby." Flora painted the four of them together, a family portrait that captured the love and connection binding them all together. She hung it in the main room of the house where everyone could see it, a testament to everything they had built. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Thomas and Margaret grew like wildflowers, strong and curious and full of life. Flora continued to paint, her work becoming increasingly sought after. Isaac expanded the ranch further, hiring more hands and building a reputation for raising some of the finest cattle in California. Charles Crawford became a fixture in their home, a doting grandfather who spoiled his grandchildren shamelessly and finally seemed at peace with his life. In 1883, Flora held her first real exhibition at a gallery in San Francisco. Isaac closed the ranch for a week so the whole family could attend, and they made the journey down from the mountains together. Flora was nervous, certain that nobody would come or that the critics would hate her work. But the opening was packed with people, and by the end of the evening she had sold every painting and had commissions for a dozen more. Isaac stood in the corner of the gallery, holding a sleeping Margaret in his arms, while Thomas leaned against his leg, and watched his wife accept praise and admiration from some of the most influential people in California. She was radiant in a new dress he had bought her for the occasion, her hair styled elegantly and her eyes shining with pride and joy. But every few minutes she would look over at him and smile, reminding him and herself of what really mattered. On their last night in San Francisco, after the children were asleep in the hotel room with Charles watching over them, Isaac and Flora walked along the waterfront hand in hand. The city lights reflected off the dark water of the bay, and fog was rolling in from the ocean, turning everything soft and dreamlike. "I cannot believe how much our lives have changed," Flora said softly. 7 years ago, I was drawing in the dirt and hoping my father would finally strike gold so we could afford to eat. Now I am selling paintings to wealthy collectors and raising 2 beautiful children with the man I love. Sometimes it does not feel real." "It is real," Isaac assured her, squeezing her hand. "You made it real, Flora. Your talent, your determination, your refusal to give up on your dreams even when everything seemed impossible. I am so proud of you I could burst." Flora stopped walking and turned to face him, her green eyes serious in the gaslight. "None of this would have happened without you, Isaac. You saw something in me worth investing in when I was just a nobody drawing pictures in the dirt. You gave me the tools I needed, literally and figuratively, to become the person I always wanted to be. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. I just bought you some paper and pencils," Isaac said, but Flora shook her head firmly. "You gave me so much more than that. You gave me hope and love and a reason to keep creating. You gave me a home and a family and a life worth living. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Isaac Keller. And I love you more today than I did the day we married." Isaac pulled her into his arms right there on the waterfront, not caring who might see them. "I love you too, Flora, more than I could ever put into words. You and our children, you are my whole world." They kissed under the San Francisco fog, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from nothing but love and determination. The family returned to the ranch and settled back into their routines. Flora balanced her art career with motherhood, somehow managing to create stunning paintings while also being fully present for her children. Isaac ran the ranch with skill and dedication, but he always made sure to save time for his family. They ate dinner together every night, and on Sundays, they would have picnics by the creek where Isaac had first kissed Flora all those years ago. In 1885, Flora became pregnant for a third time. She was 31 years old now, and the pregnancy was harder on her body than the previous two had been. But she refused to slow down, continuing to paint and care for Thomas and Margaret with the same energy and devotion as always. Their second son was born in March of 1886, a beautiful baby boy they named Henry William Keller. He had Flora's auburn hair and a personality that was evident from the very first day, loud and demanding and absolutely certain of his place in the world. Thomas and Margaret adored their baby brother, and the house was filled with laughter and chaos and love. Charles Crawford passed away peacefully in his sleep in the autumn of 1887. He was found in his room above the mercantile with a smile on his face, and Flora liked to think he had died happy, finally at peace with the choices he had made. They buried him in the Downieville cemetery with a headstone that Flora designed herself, elegant and simple and bearing the inscription, "Loving father and grandfather, he found his gold in family." Flora mourned her father deeply, but she was grateful that he had lived long enough to see her succeed, to know his grandchildren, to find some measure of redemption before the end. She painted his portrait from memory, capturing him not as the desperate, haunted man he had been during those lean years, but as the gentle grandfather he had become, with eyes full of love and forgiveness for himself. The 1890s brought new challenges and opportunities. The ranch continued to thrive, and Isaac began experimenting with breeding horses as he had always dreamed of doing. Flora's fame as an artist grew, and she began receiving commissions from as far away as New York and Boston. Their children grew and flourished, each developing their own unique personalities and talents. Thomas showed an aptitude for ranching, following his father around from the time he could walk and learning everything Isaac could teach him about cattle and horses and land management. Margaret inherited her mother's artistic talent, and by the time she was 10, she was creating drawings that showed real skill and promise. Henry was the wild one, always getting into mischief, climbing trees he should not climb, and exploring places he should not explore, giving his parents gray hairs but also making them laugh with his antics. Through it all, Isaac and Flora's love for each other never wavered. If anything, it grew deeper and richer with each passing year. They knew each other's rhythms now, could communicate with a glance or a touch. They still made love regularly, their passion undimmed by time and familiarity. They still talked for hours about everything and nothing, still laughed together at private jokes, still held hands when they walked. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1897, Isaac surprised Flora with a trip back to San Francisco. They left the children, now ranging from 19 to 11, in the capable hands of Thomas and the ranch hands, and escaped for a week of celebration and romance. Isaac had commissioned a special gift for Flora, and he gave it to her on the anniversary of the day they first met. It was a custom-made leather portfolio embossed with her initials, filled with the finest drawing paper and a complete set of professional grade pencils and charcoals. Inside the cover, Isaac had written an inscription, "To my dearest Flora, who turned dust into beauty and made all my dreams come true, all my love, always Isaac." Flora cried when she read it, overcome with emotion. 20 years had passed since that day she had been sitting in the dirt outside the mercantile, creating pictures that would be swept away by the wind. 20 years since a kind stranger had stopped to watch her work and decided she deserved better. 20 years of love and partnership and building a life together. "How did I get so lucky?" she asked Isaac through her tears. "How did I find you?" "I think I found you," Isaac said, pulling her close. "And it was the best decision I ever made, stopping to watch you draw that day. You changed my life, Flora. You made me whole. They renewed their wedding vows in a small ceremony at the same church where they had been married 2 decades earlier. Their children attended, along with a handful of close friends. And when Isaac and Flora exchanged rings again, everyone in the room could feel the love and commitment radiating between them. That night, in their hotel room overlooking the bay, they made love with the passion of newlyweds and the tenderness of old lovers who knew every inch of each other's bodies and souls. Afterward, they lay wrapped in each other's arms and talked about the future. "What do you think the next 20 years will bring?" Flora asked dreamily. "Grandchildren, if Thomas ever works up the nerve to propose to that girl he has been courting," Isaac said with a laugh. "More paintings from you, each one more beautiful than the last. Maybe Thomas taking over the ranch so I can finally teach you how to fish properly instead of just drawing the fish." "I like drawing them better," Flora protested. "They hold still for drawing." "We will watch our children grow up and make lives of their own," Isaac continued, his voice growing softer. "We will grow old together, you and I. And we will be grateful for every single day we have had. And when we are very old and looking back on our lives, we will know that we got it right. We found real love, the kind that lasts, and we built something beautiful together." Flora kissed him deeply, tasting salt from her own tears on his lips. "I cannot wait," she whispered. "I cannot wait to live all those years with you." Isaac's prediction about grandchildren came true in 1899 when Thomas married his sweetheart, a rancher's daughter named Alice, and they welcomed a son in early 1900. Flora and Isaac became grandparents, and they threw themselves into the role with enthusiasm and joy. Flora painted portraits of her grandson, capturing every stage of his development, while Isaac taught the boy to ride as soon as he was big enough to sit on a gentle horse. Margaret, true to her artistic nature, moved to San Francisco in 1901 to study at an art academy. Flora missed her daughter terribly, but was proud beyond measure that Margaret was pursuing her passion. They wrote letters every week, and Margaret would come home for extended visits, her portfolio full of new work to share with her mother. Henry, the wild child, eventually settled down enough to go to university in Sacramento where he studied law. He graduated in 1905 and returned to Downieville to set up practice, defending miners and ranchers and ordinary people who needed legal help. He married a school teacher named Elizabeth in 1906, and they gave Flora and Isaac 2 more grandchildren to spoil. As the new century progressed, Isaac and Flora entered their 50s with grace and gratitude. They were still healthy and active, still deeply in love, still finding joy in the simple pleasures of life on the ranch. Flora continued to paint, her work now considered among the finest representations of the American West. Isaac continued to run the ranch with Thomas's increasing help, proud of the legacy he would be leaving to his son. In 1907, a young journalist from New York made the journey to Downieville specifically to interview Flora for a feature article about female artists of the West. Flora was surprised by the attention but agreed to the interview. She and Isaac sat on the porch of their ranch house, the same porch where they had shared their first kiss all those years ago, and answered the journalist's questions. "Mrs. Keller, your work has been exhibited in some of the finest galleries in America," the journalist said. "What would you say was the turning point in your career? When did you know you could make it as an artist?" Flora looked at Isaac, her eyes soft with memory. "The turning point was the day my husband bought me paper and pencils. I was sitting in the dirt in town drawing pictures that would be gone in an hour, and he saw something in me worth investing in. He believed in me before I believed in myself, and that belief gave me the courage to pursue my dreams." "How did you two meet?" the journalist asked, clearly sensing a good story. Isaac took Flora's hand, their fingers linking together automatically after so many years of the gesture. "I was just passing through town, picking up supplies. I saw this beautiful woman creating art out of nothing but dust and determination, and I knew in that moment that I had to know her. So I bought her the tools she needed to create properly, and I kept coming back week after week, falling more in love with her every time." "It sounds like a romance novel," the journalist said, scribbling notes frantically. It was better than any novel, Flora said firmly. It was real and messy and sometimes difficult, but it was ours. We built this life together, raised 3 wonderful children, and supported each other's dreams every step of the way. That is the real story. Not just my paintings, but the love that made them possible. The article was published in a national magazine in 1908, complete with photographs of Flora and Isaac on their porch and several reproductions of Flora's paintings. It brought Flora even more fame and recognition, but it also brought something unexpected. Letters from young women all over the country who had read the story and felt inspired to pursue their own artistic dreams despite the obstacles they faced. Flora answered every single letter personally, offering encouragement and advice, and sometimes even sending supplies to those who could not afford them. She remembered what it was like to have talent but no resources, to dream but see no path forward. If she could help even one woman avoid that despair, it was worth the time and effort. Isaac watched his wife's generosity with pride and love. She had never forgotten where she came from, had never let success make her arrogant or unkind. She was the same woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago, just more confident and fulfilled. In 1910, Isaac and Flora celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren. Thomas and Alice now had 3 children. Henry and Elizabeth had 2, and Margaret had recently married a fellow artist and was expecting her first child. The ranch house was full of noise and laughter and love. 3 generations gathered together to celebrate. That evening, after everyone had left or gone to bed, Isaac and Flora walked down to the creek where they had spent so many important moments of their lives together. The moon was full and bright, turning the water to silver and casting everything in a gentle glow. "Do you remember the first time we came here together?" Flora asked, leaning against Isaac's solid warmth. "You kissed me right over there under that pine tree." "I remember," Isaac said softly. "I was so nervous I thought my heart was going to beat right out of my chest. I was terrified you would push me away." "I was terrified you would not kiss me," Flora admitted with a laugh. "I had been waiting for weeks, wondering if you felt the same way I did." Isaac turned Flora in his arms so he could see her face in the moonlight. She was 56 years old now, her auburn hair streaked with silver, and her face lined with the marks of a life fully lived. But to Isaac she was as beautiful as the day he first saw her, perhaps more so, because now her beauty was layered with all the years they had shared, all the love they had built together. "Flora Keller, you are the best thing that ever happened to me," he said seriously. "Every day I wake up grateful that I rode into Downieville that August morning." Flora reached up and cupped Isaac's face in her hands, hands that were still stained with paint and still capable of creating beauty. "Every day I wake up grateful for the same things. You saved me, Isaac. Not just from poverty or a life I did not want, but from believing I did not matter. You showed me that I was worth investing in, worth loving, worth building a life with. You gave me everything I ever dreamed of and so much more." They kissed under the full moon, 2 people who had weathered decades together and loved each other more with each passing year. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling with the contentment of those who know they got it right, who took the chances that mattered and reaped the rewards. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and Isaac thought about all the pictures Flora had drawn over the years. Pictures in dirt that blew away, pictures on paper that hung in galleries and homes across America, pictures that told stories and captured moments and revealed truths. But the most important picture was the life they had created together, a masterpiece more beautiful and enduring than anything that could be captured on canvas. As they climbed the steps to the porch, Flora paused and looked back at the moonlit ranch spreading out before them. The land Isaac had built from nothing, the home they had filled with love and laughter and children's voices, the legacy they would leave behind. "We did good, didn't we?" she asked softly. Isaac wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on the top of her head. "We did better than good, Flora. We did extraordinary. They stood there together for a long moment, two souls perfectly matched, before going inside to the warm house and the comfortable bed where they would sleep wrapped in each other's arms, as they had done for 32 years and would continue to do for all the years to come. The following years brought both joy and the inevitable sorrows of long lives fully lived. In 1913, Thomas and Alice welcomed their fourth child, giving Isaac and Flora their seventh grandchild. Margaret's art career flourished in San Francisco, and she had her first solo exhibition in 1914 to rave reviews. Henry's law practice thrived, and he became known throughout the region as a fierce advocate for justice and fairness. Isaac began to slow down in his mid-60s, finally allowing Thomas to take over most of the day-to-day management of the ranch. He still rode out every morning to check on things, but now it was more for the pleasure of being on horseback in the mountains he loved than from necessity. He spent more time with Flora, often sitting in her studio just watching her work, still as captivated by her talent as he had been the first day he saw it. Flora's painting evolved as she aged, becoming even more accomplished and nuanced. She began a series of paintings documenting the history of the West as she had lived it. Miners and ranchers, boom towns and busted dreams, the harsh beauty of the landscape and the resilient people who called it home. The series was acquired by a museum in San Francisco in 1916, ensuring that her vision of the West would be preserved for future generations. In the spring of 1918, as the world was consumed by war overseas, Isaac fell ill with pneumonia. Flora nursed him tirelessly, barely sleeping as she sat by his bedside and willed him to get better. Their children came home to help, and the house was once again filled with family, though this time the atmosphere was tense with worry rather than celebration. Isaac recovered slowly, his strong constitution pulling him through, but he was never quite the same afterward. He tired more easily and had to give up writing entirely, something that pained him deeply, but he did not complain, because he still had Flora by his side, and that was all that really mattered. They spent their final years in quiet contentment, surrounded by children and grandchildren who adored them. Flora continued to paint, though less frequently now, and Isaac spent his days reading and telling stories to the grandchildren who were always underfoot. They still held hands whenever they sat together, still kissed each other good morning and good night, still looked at each other with eyes full of love and devotion. On a warm evening in June 1920, Isaac and Flora sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. They were both in their late 60s now, their bodies showing the wear of hard lives well lived, but their love was as strong as ever. "I have been thinking," Isaac said slowly, his voice a bit rougher than it used to be, "about that first day I saw you. I have been trying to remember what I was planning to do that day, where I was going after I picked up supplies, and you know what? I cannot remember. Everything before that moment just fades away, like it was not important." Flora squeezed his hand gently. "I think about it too. I wonder what would have happened if you had not stopped, if you had just ridden past without seeing me. Would I still be here? Would I have married some miner and spent my life washing clothes and cooking meals and dreaming about what might have been?" "I am glad I stopped," Isaac said simply. "I am glad you stopped too," Flora replied. "You changed my life in ways I could never repay." "You did not need to repay me," Isaac said, turning to look at her with those whiskey-colored eyes that could still make her heart skip a beat. "Loving you has been repayment enough. Being loved by you, building a life with you, watching our children grow and thrive, that has been the greatest gift of my life." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the mountains and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance they could hear their grandchildren playing, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and thriving, a testament to everything they had built together. Isaac passed away peacefully in his sleep in September 1921, with Flora lying beside him just as she had for 43 years of marriage. He was 69 years old, and he died with a smile on his face, his hand clasped in Flora's. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives Isaac had touched, and he was buried in the Downieville cemetery overlooking the mountains he had loved. Flora mourned him deeply, but did not let grief consume her. She knew that Isaac would not have wanted her to stop living, to stop creating. So she painted through her sorrow, pouring her love and loss onto canvas in ways that words could never capture. She created a series of paintings of Isaac, each one showing a different facet of the man she had loved. Isaac the rancher, Isaac the father, Isaac the husband, who had believed in her when no one else did. The final painting in the series showed Isaac as she had first seen him that day in Downieville, sitting tall on his horse with the sun bright behind him, stopping to watch a woman draw pictures in the dirt. It was a moment frozen in time, the beginning of everything that mattered. Flora titled it simply The Meeting, and she hung it in a place of honor in the house where she could see it every day. Flora lived for another 12 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She continued to paint almost until the end, her talent undimmed even as her body grew frail. She taught Margaret's daughter to draw, passing on the skills her own mother had taught her, ensuring that the gift would continue through the generations. She told stories about Isaac to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive through words and pictures. She spoke of his kindness and his strength, his unwavering belief in her dreams, the love that had sustained them both through 43 years of marriage. She wanted everyone to know what kind of man he had been, what kind of love they had shared. Flora Catherine Keller passed away in her sleep in March 1933 at the age of 79. She was buried beside Isaac in the Downieville cemetery, and her headstone bore an inscription she had written herself years earlier. Artist, wife, mother, beloved, she turned dust into beauty and was loved beyond measure. The ranch passed to Thomas, who ran it with the same dedication and skill his father had shown. Margaret became one of the most celebrated artists of her generation, always crediting her mother as her greatest influence and inspiration. Henry continued his law practice, fighting for justice until he was too old to stand in a courtroom anymore. The Keller family thrived for generations, each one carrying forward the legacy of Isaac and Flora's love. The paintings Flora had created were preserved and celebrated, hanging in museums and private collections across the country. But perhaps her greatest masterpiece was not any single painting, but the life she and Isaac had built together, a love story that began with pictures in the dirt and a kind stranger who saw something worth treasuring. In the end, that first meeting in the dusty street of Downieville had changed not just 2 lives, but countless others. It had created a family, inspired art that would last for centuries, and proved that love could bloom in the most unlikely places if 2 people were brave enough to reach for it. Isaac had bought Flora paper and pencils, but what he had really given her was the belief that she mattered, that her dreams were worth pursuing, that she was worth loving. And Flora had given him something just as precious, a partnership built on mutual respect and admiration, a love that deepened with each passing year, a home filled with laughter and warmth and meaning. Their story became legend in Downieville, passed down through generations as an example of what real love looked like. The old-timers would tell newcomers about the cowboy who stopped to watch a woman drawing in the dirt, who bought her supplies and came back week after week until she agreed to marry him. They would talk about the paintings that came from those gifted hands, the ranch that prospered, the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward a legacy of love and creativity and determination. And sometimes on warm summer evenings when the light was just right, people swore they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old Keller ranch house, hand in hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and talking softly about all the years they had shared. Whether it was memory or imagination or something more, it served as a reminder that some loves are so powerful they echo through time, inspiring and uplifting long after the lovers themselves are gone. The papers and pencils Isaac bought that day in 1876 had cost him maybe $2, but they had been an investment that paid dividends beyond measure. They had been the catalyst for a love story that spanned decades, created beauty that would last for generations and prove that sometimes the smallest gestures of kindness and belief can change the entire world.